This morning we're going to look at how posture affects the golf swing, and specifically at three different areas. If you imagine that your spine is like the axle or axis on a car, then a bent axle would be a pretty rough ride. Let's have a look today at what three main errors are and also what you can do about them. So the first error we want to look at is when you set yourself up is the spine's position looking from side on. So when I'm setting myself up here, ideally I take my normal spine curvature and tilt forward to the ball. What most players will do is that when they go forward, they'll actually just round the back. So that makes it quite awkward for the body to work correctly, because as the spine bends, the discs of the spine are not aligned correctly. And what will happen is that'll make the rotation much more difficult to achieve right through the spine. So to set yourself up correctly, a drill that you can do is if I hold this club against my head, and so my one hand's against my head, second hand is against my belt, and I've also got contact through the middle of my back. And now when I tilt forward, I want to retain contact with all 3 points, rather than losing contact either at the belt or the head or both. So when you do that, that puts you in a more exaggerated position than what you would normally be in for a golf swing, but that's absolutely okay. Because once you bring your hands around to the front of you, if you feel like you're in much that same position with the upper back, then you're probably likely to be in pretty good position for the golf swing. Now, if the middle of your spine, your thoracic region of your spine is quite stiff, then that will be a challenge for you to start with. But anything that you do that's going to create some mobility through that area, and doing something like, some Pilates movement or something like that, is going to be really beneficial for your golf to create that mobility through the spine. Once you've got that sensation, even if it feels a little bit stiff, which will be the muscles working, when you stand to address the ball, you'll actually be standing quite nicely. So that's the first thing, is that getting that back from being rounded, particularly the upper back, to being flatter. The second thing is if we look at belt line. So when I set myself up here, if we look at my belt line, it's horizontal. And then from here, if I have that rounded posture, as I go forward, you'll notice that my belt line still stays quite horizontal. It might have moved a little bit, but essentially it stayed horizontal. What I'm looking for is when I tilt forward, I want to tilt forward from my hip joints, so that as soon as I start to tilt forward, you'll notice that my belt line starts to change, so that my hips are now tilted forward. So when I'm at address, my belt line is going to be tilted down around about 20 degrees. Now, a couple of things about this. When you do that forward tilt, make sure that you don't drop your belt line too far, and that may actually be the error for some of you. If you do that, you'll notice that there's a little bit of an arch through the lower back. And even when I put myself in that position there with that little arch, and that may be because I've been told to stick my backside out when I'm setting myself up, or that I'm trying to keep my back straight and I'm arching my back, I can even feel that putting quite a bit of pressure there. Now, a little bit of exercise that you can do is that when you set yourself up from here, if I change the angle of my belt line, so I can tilt my belt line up or tilt it down. So I'm actually rotating through my pelvis to get the belt line coming up and going down. If you do that, and you might find that you'll get a shuddering as you do that. That's just the control of the muscles not used to that movement. So you could actually practice that rotating the pelvis while you're lying on the ground. It's a bit wet here, so I'm not going to demonstrate this one for you. The third thing I want to talk about is forward lean with your upper body. So if I turn around to this camera here, when I lean forward here, you can see that my back is leaning forward but not very far. So what we want to do is we want the back to lean forward. If vertical, let's call that 180 degrees. And then if I was completely horizontal, that would be 90. So I'm looking for my back to be leaning forward at about, 140 to 145. So that's going to be about there somewhere. Now, if I'm leaning over too far, which is less common, or standing too straight, which is far more common, then I'm not achieving that. Now, what that does is that's going to affect the path of my club and my arms as I go back and through. Now, when I do swing back and through, I want my arms are going to swing on a different line to what my body's turning, and my club's going to swing on a different line to that. But when they're very, very different, so my spine's upright, I have to lift my arms up, and then I'm in trouble as far as trying to control the path of the club goes. So when I'm tilting forward, so sort of about 145 degrees to 140 degrees, and that's going to be pretty much the same with all the clubs I'm using. So they're the three key things. We've got the roundedness of the upper body, the tilt of the belt line, and also the total bend forward with the upper body. So they're our three key things. Now the fourth one, the bonus, is how much my knees flex. So a good checkpoint for you is that when I set myself up, my knees are going to be flexed a little, and the front of my knee is about level with the end of the laces on my shoes there. So if my knees are too straight, then that front of my knee is not level with the end of the laces. If my knees are bent too much, then they're going to be level with the toe of my shoes or somewhere around there. And the more flexed if my knees are too flexed or not flexed enough, then that affects my ability as my hips are turning to keep my body stable. So there's the bonus for you. If you're practicing these things, do it watching your reflection either in a mirror or a window. Get the feel of rotating the hips back and forward. Do the drill with the club behind your head, and you'll find that even if those positions feel uncomfortable for you to begin with, they'll still have a positive effect on your swing.